Hi everybody, and welcome to Sales Chats. Yes, we're back again. We've had a little brief hiatus, but we're ready to go again. If you've been with us before, you know the drill. This is a 30-minute rapid-fire session. Follow us along on Twitter, #SalesChat. Our topic today is a really important one. It's customer advocacy, and so it's great to have Joel Capperella here as our special guest. So welcome, Joel.
Thanks, John. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so Joel has 20 years experience in strategic marketing and enterprise software, SaaS, and technical professional services. So he really helps his clients gain more awareness, a bigger pipeline, faster revenue, and he empowers their transformation, and he's all about customer advocacy. So let's get right into it, right? So in preparation for this meeting, Joel, I looked up customer advocacy, and I went to, the font of all knowledge and truth, which is Wikipedia, right?
Sure.
Yeah, exactly. And it defines customer advocacy as a specialized form of customer service in which companies focus on what's best for the customer. It's a change in the company's culture that's supported by customer-focused customer service and marketing techniques. Now, from my point of view, that's what, most companies or salespeople, if you ask them, would say, oh yeah, we're customer focused. We really care about the customer. So give me your explanation of customer advocacy and why is it important?
Sure, John. Well, it's interesting because when we look, pipeliners are selling a CRM tool. I'm in the business of marketing solutions, and a lot of times what happens is when we think about customer advocacy, we mistakenly believe it to be something that serves us. In other words, we want to achieve and gain that level of a relationship with our customers, so quite candidly, we could use them in the next deal to offer us a testimonial, to pick up a phone and get on with one of our prospects. Well, that serves us, but it misses the definition you just talked about, which is, hey, it needs to be customer-oriented and focused, right? So a lot of times I see marketing professionals and sales professionals take kind of a utilitarian approach to customer advocacy, and it really results in not great ability to serve the customer, and therefore, ironically enough, decreases our ability to tap into our most important customers to help them partner with us to extend what we're doing as far as selling our solutions, if that's what we're in the business of doing. So I think it could be a tricky thing to navigate that relationship in a way that's not self-serving, but indeed is service-centric and service-focused.
Right, so that seems to me that's a somewhat of a cultural shift, and it's I mean, everybody, as I said, salespeople and organizations will always say, oh, we try to look at it from a customer point of view.
Sure.
But if you're really going to look at it from a non kind of self-serving viewpoint and take a longer term approach to it, what are some of the things that you've got to do? How have you got to do things differently?
Well, it's interesting. I've been writing and talking a lot about this lately, and I think, I've been in this business long enough to remember when we first got into kind of persona-based marketing and searching for the pain and solving the pain, which is all important. In other words, what we do and what we sell needs to solve a need for sure. I mean, that's table stakes to get into the business. But somewhere along the way, I think we lost the concept of being a little bit more prescriptive to our customers. In other words, trying to understand their business maybe better than even they understand it themselves. Because let's be honest about it, they have one set of challenges within their context, right? We've got the good fortune of seeing it across multiple businesses. So they might be similar, those challenges from business to business, but we've got the good fortune of seeing those challenges in different scenarios. We see things differently to see what works. So I think to achieve this level of service-oriented customer advocacy, we have to make it our business to, and you're right about the cultural shift because it has to start internally, but we have to make it our business to understand those challenges across all of our customers, across the entire industry in a way where we could identify something over here that benefited customer A that's going to benefit customer Z equally as much, maybe in a little bit of a different nuanced way, but again, that's our job, right? To serve them in a way that's going to let them tap into the information that's going to help them do their jobs better. So solving the pain is important for sure, but we have to, again, make it our business to be a little bit more prescriptive. And the only way that we could be more prescriptive is to pay intimate attention to what's happening, not just in our most important customer, but across their entire industry. Is it a daunting task? I mean, it can be, but I think any sales professional and marketing professional would agree is when you know the landscape much more intimately, you're a better professional.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, and one that I know a lot of salespeople and sales organization miss out on, the fact that you are in a unique position, because when you go into a customer, you maybe deal with their competitors, you maybe
Sure.
deal with other people in their space. Again, so you have some great insights to bring to them, which is real value add. And on top of that, I think over the last number of years, things have changed significantly, where personally I believe is salespeople need to have a greater level of business acumen than ever
Oh,
before.
absolutely. Yeah, I
They
agree
need
with
to understand the business of business. And as you said, they really need to understand the whole landscape of the industries that their customers are operating in. So this puts a tremendous pressure on a salesperson. So when you advise salespeople, how do you advise them, what research to do and how to approach this from a more systematic point of view?
Well, talking about culture sometimes could be a non-starter for people, because people don't
Yeah.
want to hear that. They hear that, oh, we have to change our culture, and really, what does that mean? But I really do think it begins there. Um, there's a natural tension between marketing and sales. I mean, it's always existed. I don't think it's ever going to go away. But that tension, even though it's necessary to do what we do as professionals, has to be tempered a little bit so we can collaborate around what we really need to do, and how we need to be a little bit more acquainted with the marketplace. So again, how do we address it from a cultural perspective? Well, it can't be a utilitarian need. Look, you're a sales pro for your entire career, probably, John. How many times has a marketing team member asked you for access to your most important customer, and you've got some big deal ready to close, and you don't want to upset the apple cart, right? I mean, that's probably something you don't want to do, right?
Yeah, and I've been on both sides actually, so marketing and sales. So it's
Yeah, great. So
yeah,
you know from both sides of the equation, right?
exactly.
So so if we obviously don't want to. So how do we then internally? Because again, I think it's a matter of culture. How do we internally have everyone be on the same page that, look, our customer advocacy first and foremost isn't about us, but it's about the customer. However, that being said, marketing needs to understand and appreciate what it's like to be a quota-carrying salesperson, and the tension that happens and exists and the stress of that job. I mean, listen, I know you guys are big proponents of this, and I believe it. I think the sales professional is the only one with financial risk in the game. I mean, that's just a fact. If they don't perform, they don't have a job, and they don't get paid, right? So marketing
Yeah.
professionals need to be more aware of that. If we understand where each other's coming from, now from the sales professional side of things, they have to understand as well. I mean, how many times have they asked for a customer reference? So they're on the other side of it, and they need that's the last thing they believe they need to get the deal over the goal line, right? Well, if that's the case, and they know how important it is, then they need to take part in the effort to get more customers singing our praises, being advocates for what we do, receiving our
Yeah.
service in a way that makes them willing and excited to talk.
Yeah, I mean I think that's a fantastic point, and it's funny. It's one that recurs all the time. As you say, when salespeople are late in a sales cycle, they're like, "Oh, this is a financial services customer. Do we have any customer references from financial services?" And then a week later, when you ask them to get a reference, they're like, "Well, I'm not sure I really want to ask the customer right now."
Yeah, sure.
There's always this fear. I mean, it's almost, as you say, it's that idea of, once the person's a customer, if it ain't broke, don't mess with it. Like, don't engage with the customer just in case, an issue comes up, which is
Yeah.
probably just completely the wrong way of looking at it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can't be a need of last resort, right? It has to
Right.
be a way of doing business.
So I've seen, just did a bit of research. I've seen companies, take different approaches to customer advocacy. Some of them even try and incent customers to be customer advocates, and that just seems to me a little bit fraught. So how would you recommend, if you were going to start a customer advocacy campaign right now, how would you recommend going about it?
Well, getting back to the idea of placing their needs central, right? I think there's simple things we could do to start to create a natural engagement, right? For instance, every company that's been doing business for at least a year or two has some kind of case study that they developed somewhere along the line. So So they exist, right? So a lot of times what I tell my clients is, hey, let's dive into those existing case studies, because what we usually get is a marketing, 2-page piece that says, oh, here's where they were, and here's where they are, and here's the metrics. Certainly important. I think it's a good headline. But what's the story behind there? Or in other words, what's the story behind what happened with those metrics? Who were the individual professionals on the customer side that benefited from that good? And here's an interesting point that not many consider. What about the customer's customer? How did their customer's customer benefit? There's a drama inherent in all of that. So you could take that one single 2-page piece and extend the life of that infinitely by creating additional blog posts, presentations, infographics. Video is so easy to do. I mean, look, we're chatting. You couldn't do this 5 years ago as easily as we can today, when we're chatting over video and recording it. Get them on a Google Hangout or Skype or even Facebook Live or something like that, and ask them about the nuance behind the metrics. I mean, if we look and focus in on the drama of what actually happened there, it goes much further than a 2-page piece, because newsflash, your competitor has just as many 2-page pieces that say all the same things that your 2-page piece says. So how do you differentiate? You differentiate by getting a little bit more discreet and tell the story of how those benefits impacted the customer, the people that existed at the company and what their careers look like now, and then the customer's customer. And what's awesome about that, John, is that's just one single case study we're talking about. So let's say you have 5 of them. You could literally jack up your customer advocacy for the entire year based upon those 5 case studies that you already have.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point, because I think we often fail, as you say, to look beyond the customer to their customer and the impact it has in their market, which I think is a great idea. And you're right, everybody has the 2-page case study, and everybody thinks they're different. I had a real interesting experience a number of years ago when I got involved in a partner program with 3 competitors to the company I was running at the time. And we all sat down in the room and we all agreed that we would lay out our unique customer engagement process, just to see each other's and learn from each other's. And guess what? Turned out none of them were unique, and they all were pretty much the same. So I think, this is a great takeaway from this session already. Is if you take your case studies that much further, and actually, as you say, to quote you, get into the drama and understand the impact, that you're going to immediately kind of differentiate yourself from the bland 2-page. What was your issue? Here was a solution. Here's the outcome. Thumbs up, and everybody's happy.
Everybody's happy, and world hunger was saved.
Exactly.
And on and on. Yeah.
Exactly. At Pipeliner, we created a model called network selling. Right. It's something that myself and Nicholas worked on. Nicholas Kimler, our founder, we've worked on over the last year or so, where the goal of the salesperson is to create a win-win, enjoyable, mutually beneficial experience for the buyer and seller, so that the buyer then becomes the advocate and the network multiplier.
Yeah.
From your experience, you told me through what does a process like that look like, and how can salespeople get into that mindset of the win-win of actually making it a beneficial and almost enjoyable experience.
Yeah, you know what I think, John, is I learned one of the best lessons in my career working with a life insurance salesman, of all things, believe it or not. If you know anything about that industry, these guys are commission-based sales professionals.
Commission only.
Yeah, absolutely. They don't get paid at all. They don't sell policies, right? The best ones have an incredible network, okay? And they know that when they close one deal, they sell one policy, they know there's 5 to 10 others within that relationship itself. And they don't, and they serve them by helping their clients make it easy to talk about what they've just done. Look, nobody wants to talk about life insurance, right? Sure. So the really good ones make it easy, make the process easy, make their new client feel pumped up that they made this different decision, help them talk about it. Also, do little things such as, let's say they're moving, right, and they know a realtor. They introduce them to the realtor. They introduce them to their accountant, and on and on. Now, look, that's like blocking and tackling, sales 101 type stuff. But I find in business-to-business related sales that sometimes we forget about those things. Sometimes we forget that, look, the person, the man or woman that we're selling to has a career, and they have career aspirations. And, it reminds me back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and, the old adage would be, well, nobody ever got fired for selecting Microsoft, remember? Or even before that, nobody ever got fired for selecting IBM, right? Yeah. Right? Well, that's the safe choice, right? I've seen great sales professionals challenge their prospects to take a different route, but not because of the value that it impacts to the company, because it certainly does, but what it does to their career, right? So in other words, connecting with their prospect on a personal level to help them advance and drive their career forward, help them be a better manager, help them be a better leader of the business, help them map out their career progression in an intelligent way. I mean, that, and then what ends up happening there, that's at the very foundational level, right? And oh, by the way, I'm a marketing person at heart. If marketing isn't empowering and enabling the sales team to have those conversations, then they're not in sync, right? Marketing needs to empower the sales team to be able to have those conversations. To tell, look, because I don't want, again, as a marketing pro, I don't want my sales team distracted, right? So I feel it's incumbent upon me to say, listen, if they're this profile, they probably care about these. Here's an event they might not know about. Introduce that event to them. Tell them that we're going to be there. Tell them why they should go, right? It might not be related to our software or our service at all. But what does it do? It helps embed ourselves in the nature of that relationship from a place of service, from a place of customer advocacy as we're discussing it, and it extends that network. It gives us an honest to good professional network. One last note about this, John, and then I'll put your 2 cents on this. I host a podcast called Leading Matters. I've had some great authors on the show, like Daniel Pink and people like that. But I can tell you, I get more listeners from small-time business people that are really well-networked than I do New York Times best-selling authors. Because their network knows them, they gain value from them, and they love and they consume everything that they do. So.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and one of the things that I stress a lot, and I think we overlook it constantly, and I know we're all guilty of doing it, is that when you sell something to a customer, right? Inherently or intrinsically, that customer then becomes the owner of your product or your service within their organization. So when that product or service gets rolled out, if there's problems or whatever, it comes back on the person who made the purchasing decision or the person who was put in charge of the rollout. So the more we can support them and make them feel a partner during that process, because there's nothing more lonely for a customer than, you make a purchase, you roll it out to the organization, people are going, hey, this isn't working for me, and you call up the vendor and you can't get through to them, or you're shoved off to support to a knowledge base or something, and you leave them. And I think that's a really critical period, and I think that's where you can win somebody as a customer advocate. What's your thought on that period, sort of straight after the purchase?
Yeah, and I could not agree more with you, John. I think that, look, again, I've been in the game long enough where I work for some really big ERP players, and back in the thousands, we could roll up a bus of 20 professionals to take down a deal, right? You had an expert on everything. Well, guess what? The model doesn't support that any longer, right? But the complexity hasn't gone away. So the model doesn't support it any longer. The complexity hasn't gone away, so the salesperson has a greater burden on their shoulders. And I agree. I think that just like the networking, I've seen the best salespeople care intimately about the successful implementation of what they just sold. Not cash their quota, check, and move on to the next deal, although a lot of them want to do that, but to really care and be almost a quarterback of serving needs, and then being the one that's going to where the buck stops, right? And not just, and it's funny because a lot of, I know a guy worked for Career Builder, and a Career Builder, if you know anything about their model, they have their job postings, they also have a lot of technology. Well, the sales guy's involved in the one side of the business, but he's not as involved in the technology side, right? So what this one really successful guy at Career Builder, what he does is he stays intimately aware of what's happening on the technology side. So even though in the hierarchy of Career Builder, he's got no authority over what's happening there, he takes it upon himself to be the advocate for his customer, or customer advocacy, right? In a way that the buck, he feels, stops with him, even though on technology renewals, he gets no compensation at all. Now, why is that good? What are we talking about here? We're talking about customer advocacy. Do you think those customers are going to be willing to get on the phone with him to give him a reference? Absolutely they are, because he's the one running interference for them to make sure those early stages are working, and that for the life of that implementation, he can help them solve their concerns and issues.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And just quickly take a quick sideways look here for a second and see, Martha, do we have any interesting Twitter questions coming in for us?
At the moment, not.
Okay. So what I wanted to move on to next, Joel, is maybe if you could give us some examples of where you've seen great customer advocacy programs and what they look like.
Sure. I think I can give you some examples just from my travels and some of my clients. I have a software company that I do business with right now, and they've taken the idea and the concept of the advisory panel, right? So again, the advisory panel is, hey, it kind of is a little self-serving because it helps us kind of map out and make a decision on how we're going to develop our product and whatnot, right? But what they've done with it is they've made the panel complete. They've almost customer-led. So the customer drives the agenda, and they bring up the topics they want to discuss. It's a quarterly type of meeting like this, and they get together once a year. But what they do, what's interesting about it is that these customers participate not because there's any compensation or they get preferential treatment. They certainly don't, right? But because they feel as though they're collaborative partners in what they're trying to accomplish with the solution. I think the same thing can be said about services. One of my professional services clients, the talent is really important to them. So what they do is they profile the different freelance professionals that they place and that they use on their projects. So they raise and elevate them to like an all-star status. So each month they're actually profiling a different professional and a different skill set on a different job, on a different project. Now, what ends up happening is it's a good story to tell for talent because they need more of that to be able to do these jobs. But also, it's a portfolio of expertise that they can then offer to their clients. Look, we've done a job like yours, and here's the story. So it serves both ends. So again, it's a matter of, and oh, by the way, asking, John, I think is a big thing too. I can't tell you how many companies simply don't ask for the reference, don't ask for the advocacy.
Yeah, I think there's also, as we talked about earlier, there's also that idea of, a customer needs to be a customer for 2 years before you ask them for a reference, when in fact, studies have shown that some of the most successful salespeople ask for a reference immediately after they sell.
Yeah.
And get some referrals that
Absolutely.
way. But I love the customer advisory panel. It's something that some companies that I've been with, have done very successfully in the past. And I think the point that you raise is a really good one about the fact that when you do something like a customer advisory panel, they become your partners, and then they almost feel like they're helping design your product or your service. Now, obviously, you have to you have to control that and manage that carefully. But there's nothing better than a customer who feels so invested in your service and in your company that, as you say, they become that all-important advocate. So, I would encourage people to look at that. I mean, nowadays it's expensive and stuff, to bring people together. But as you said, we've got the technology. There's no reason why you can't do virtual customer panels.
Absolutely.
So what is with all your experience of doing this and talking about customer advocacy and consulting with people, what's the biggest mistake you see people make?
We're only 30 minutes here, right, John?
Yeah, I know. So that's why I'm only asking for one.
Well, look, again, we were just talking about asking. I think that is, without a doubt, the biggest mistake, is that we simply don't ask. It's just like any good salesperson knows as well. You got to ask for the business. You got to ask for the close. I mean, I learned that early in my career. You're not going to close the deal unless you ask them to close, right? I think it's the same thing here. Another one closely related to that is setting expectations. That's a big part of it. I think if we're not setting expectations early, that listen, we're going to do this for you. You're going to love it. It's going to get you where you need to be. It's going to be a big impact to your business, to your careers, and on and on. We're going to want you to talk about it. I think setting those expectations early, that listen, if we're successful, we're going to expect you to promote it, not promote it isn't the right word, but to raise your hand and say yes, to confirm, to affirm us in what we do, and be a partner and do it, helping us do it for the next. I think, and a lot of times some people shy away from this, but I think putting it in your contractual language as well. It can be soft for sure, and it's also, I like this for two reasons, John. If we put in our contract language that, listen, we expect you some expectation of you're going to say good things about us if you're happy, or whatever it might be. Legal will certainly help you sort that out, what the language needs to be. But I like it for two reasons. One, if it's in there, you inherently have the discussion. But secondly, I think it's a good thing to throw out if you need to at the negotiation table as well, because it's a win for you if they sign the contract and the language is in there. But really, you're going to get in customer advocacy no matter what. So it's a nice thing to maybe get rid of if you need to get rid of something in the negotiation. So I think it does serves two purposes. So setting the expectation and seeing if you can't formalize it in some soft language as part of the deal negotiation.
So as we're bumping up against, we've got about 5 minutes left here. Okay, so if that's number one, if we say number one mistake is not asking for it. So if we flip that on its head, if the first takeaway, the big takeaway from today is ask for the reference.
Yeah.
What would be your second big takeaway for today? If people were going to do one thing like ask for the reference, what would be the second thing they should do?
You know, that's a good one. And it might be stacked a little bit because where I am right now, but I think video is so easy right now. Video is so easy to capture that if you're not, and oh, by the way, every sales guy or gal has a video device in their purse or in their pocket, right?
Yeah.
I think we need to set the expectations for our sales force that every time you've got a great conversation with the customer, you're face to face, ask them if you could take a selfie video with them. It might seem silly, you might be uncomfortable with it at first, but I got to tell you, once you get in the habit of doing it, all of a sudden you've got all these video testimonials, and you don't even need to ask for an official, company recognition. In other words, people are free to talk about themselves and what they're doing. So make it about them. Don't make it about their company, about what they're doing, and you could. And they're okay personally to publish it. You never mention the client's name if it's tough to get them talking. You've got the video testimonial. And oh, by the way, if you link that up with their LinkedIn profile, it's very easy for people to find out who they work for. And look, John, it's funny because I'm, being a marketer, I look at all the new, social media things that are coming along and how we could use them. So Snapchat's really on the rise right now. It's a great tool for this because you can get the video limits you to 10 seconds. So if you're uncomfortable doing it, you can you can get anybody to say, yeah, I love what you're doing in 10 seconds. And you could save those videos to your phone and then use them. So if you're uncomfortable doing it, and I'm sure many of us watching this have teenage children, so if you don't know how to use it, get them to teach you how to use it. But long answer to a short question here, I think video is the way to go and things we should be getting comfortable with.
Yeah, I'd have to refer to my son on the Snapchat. I mean, I know about it, I've seen it, I don't really understand it that well, but I agree with you. Actually, a number of months back, we were doing a breakfast seminar for people, and we had one customer stand up, and I asked them a few questions, and they gave us a go. And I actually videoed it with my iPhone while I was asking the questions. Yeah. And to your point about it kind of. When you think about it in beforehand, you kind of think this could look kind of awkward because I kind of did it on the fly, off the cuff, but then it actually turned out to be the most natural thing in the world because people are so used to having like a device waved around in front of them that they don't really care anymore. And it didn't knock the guy off his stride, one iota. Okay, so how we like to wrap up is two things. Number one. Before you go, can you name one of your daily secrets for getting in the right mindset for success? What do you do when you get up in the morning? How do you set yourself up for success every day?
Well, I always begin with the end in mind, John. That's I guess what that came from 7 Habits, maybe, right? But I've always loved that since I first read it. In other words, I frame out my year, my quarter, my month, and then down to my day. In other words, I've got a goal by the end of the day of what I want to achieve. Not necessarily real concrete or discrete, but what is the one thing I want to accomplish today? And then I'm able to reflect on that in the evening. So literally, when I wake up, I have a habit of that's the first thing to pop into my head. Before I go to bed at night, I literally write it down on my Evernote. So in my Evernote, I've got that. It's my most recent note. Here's the one thing, and it's not long. It's like 10 words, right? So I write it last thing I do before I head off to bed, and then it's the first thing I'll take a look at in the morning to remind myself. So that's what tries to set. What it does, it ends up framing my day with a theme, with an objective, with the focus, rather than kind of scurrying around. Because look, we're busy, and if we don't zero in, we get scurried. So that's one thing I do.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's a great, the idea of always the end in mind. You can't actualize what you don't visualize, etc. I think that's really perfect.
Yeah, I read a great book by Charles Duhigg. I think his name's called, it's about habits. It's The Power of Habits, and that's actually where I kind of combine that. But there's a whole great part of the book where he talks about Michael Phelps, and the Olympics are coming up, so this is kind of pertinent, how he visualized every meet and swim, and in the '08 Olympics he actually, his goggles in one of his gold medal swims filled up with water, but he was able to complete it because he had visualized that swim so many times. So I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to finish then, Joel, tell us a little bit about how people can get in contact with you and what you're doing, and how they can learn more about customer advocacy.
Sure. You can find me at Joel Cap, that's JOELCAP.com. And if you go to joelcap.com/video, I have a nice 10-minute video on customer advocacy and the three obstacles that are in our way to getting more. And on that page, there's a download for 6 ways to get your customers talking. So again, that's joelcap.com, and if you go to joelcap.com/video, you can check out the download there and get some information. So that's the best way to contact me there. My email is joel@joelcapperella.com, and I'll be happy to chat with anybody who might want to talk about these things further.
Yeah, listen, thanks very much again for coming on today, Joel. Joel, as you can see, these 30 minutes really fly by,
yeah.
But you can fit a lot of gems in it. So remember, everybody who's listening or watching or going to be watching the recording later, ask for the referral.
Yes.
Also, when you're doing, look at your customer testimonials and that you have right now and extend them. Go and understand the impact it had for your customer's customer. And then look at different ways of engaging with your customers when you're not selling to them.
Great.
All right, well, with that, we'll let it go for today. Again, thanks very much to Joel, thanks to Martha in Vienna, who's keeping everything running for us in the background there. And we'll see you on the next Sales Chat. My name is John Golden, and this is Sales Chats from Pipeliner CRM. Thank you.